So, cell membranes and transport. The reason why I put these together is because when we talk about cell transport, we're talking about things crossing the cell membrane. So, the cell transport mechanisms, and there are a few today. We'll talk about the general categories of those. Are dependent on the structure of the cell membrane. So, we're going to start with that. So, the first thing, the cell membrane is made of phospholipids. And what those phospholipids look like, so they have a head, which is actually a phosphate. So remember me telling you a circle is a phosphate. And two tails. Okay, so the head is what we call hydrophilic. So it's a hydrophilic head. And then the tails are what we call hydrophobic. So what that means is that hydrophilic, they like water. Hydrophobic, they do not. So when we're looking at the structure of the cell membrane, what it actually looks like, we've got these little heads here all lined up together. And then we have tails coming off of each one of those. So those are each your little individual phospholipids. And the problem is that there is water on both sides of that, and the tails don't like water. So the way that they combat that is this. So they have two layers of this. So they're arranged something like that. So we have two separate layers of these phospholipids where the tails are on the inside. So these are the hydrophobic. And then hydrophilic is going to be here. Okay, because water is on this side and water is on that side. So the tails want to stay away from that water. So they're pointed in toward each other. Okay, so what we call this is the phospholipid bilayer. So that is the name of the membrane. So any kind of cell membrane, that is what it is going to be called, is a phospholipid bilayer. So the cell membrane, the membranes around the organelles, that's what they're called. They are phospholipid bilayers, and they're called a bilayer because there are two layers. There's one on the top and one on the bottom that's upside down. Okay, and what the cell membrane does, so the cell membrane is made of phospholipids, and it controls what goes in and out. So all cells have this because all cells, it's important that they're able to regulate what's going in and out of the cell. Okay. So another way of stating they control what goes in and out is that they maintain homeostasis. So what that is, so homeostasis, that is a state of balance. So balance in the cell. So they're able to control what goes in and out to maintain that proper balance in the cell. Okay. And I will make a note here. So hydrophilic is water loving. So we have the water loving heads, and then we have the water, it means fearing, water fearing tails. All right. So those are the layers of the cell membrane. So when we're talking about the types of transport in the cells that can happen across that, there are two main categories for this. So we have two main categories. So the first category is passive transport. And the second category is active transport. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line a little separating these. So passive transport versus active transport. So passive transport, by definition, is transport that is not using energy. So no energy is used. No energy or ATP used. Whereas active transport, by definition, does require energy. So it requires energy. Or ATP. Okay. Passive transport is moving materials from high to low. So that's kind of like if you have, if you're riding a bicycle and there's a hill, so high to low, then someone riding the bicycle is able to very easily move down that hill. That should say L. Okay, they're easily able to climb down or to ride down that hill with not a whole lot of effort added. So that's no energy. Okay, whereas if someone is trying to ride up the hill or go from low to high concentration, so active transport is low to high. So that's like if somebody is trying to ride up a hill. So if you're trying to ride a bicycle up a hill, then it's not going to do it's not going to be a very easy thing to do, because riding a bicycle up a hill really is a difficult thing to do. Even with a tiny little slope, it's really difficult. So this requires energy. Whereas when you're riding down a hill, it's pretty much effortless. You can, as long as you're holding on and maintain your balance, and then it's pretty easy to do. So there are a couple of examples of these. So examples of passive transport. We have diffusion, and then we have osmosis. We have facilitated. I'm not going to be able to fit that there. So the examples are osmosis, diffusion, and facilitated diffusion. So you'll have some practice with that. For active transport, so the examples are just regular active transport. So I'm just going to put regular active transport. And then endocytosis and exocytosis. So what those are, so the regular active transport is just you have a membrane and you're trying to move something. So let's say you have a lot of molecules down here on the bottom and just a little bit up top. So moving the molecules from the top to the bottom is going to be difficult because you're trying to push more molecules into a place where there's already a ton of them. Kind of like if you're in an empty classroom and you're trying to get into the super full hallway, it's hard to kind of push yourself in there. It's a lot easier to just flow into the classroom. So for passive transport, it's the opposite. So for passive transport, you have a lot of molecules on one side. So we'll say the outside here has a ton of molecules, and the inside has just a few. So that's kind of like if you're in a super crowded hallway and you're going into an empty classroom. So it's very, very easy to move to where there's less. Okay. So active transport is moving to where there's more, and it takes energy to push it there. And then passive transport is moving to where there's less because you can just kind of ride that out. Down what is called a concentration gradient. Yeah, I'm going to throw that word in there. So concentration gradient. So what that is, this is kind of its own little thing here. So concentration gradient, what that is the difference in concentration. So molecules want to flow to where there's less. That doesn't take any energy. And the molecules want to, and in active transport, they don't want to move to where there's a high concentration because there's already too many there. So it's going what we call against the concentration gradient. It's working against something, and that's why it requires energy. Whereas passive transport, it's just going with the concentration gradient. So the concentration gradient is high to low. So that's why passive transport is happy to do that, because it's just flowing down that hill. So the concentration gradient is kind of like the hill in the bike examples. So remember our bike examples here. So going from high to low, going down, that concentration gradient is super easy. But going from low to high, going up that hill is quite a bit more difficult. So going up the concentration gradient is a lot more difficult than going down the concentration gradient. So just to throw that vocabulary word in there, because you'll definitely see that. So that is cell membranes and transport, and I hope that was helpful.